Hey everybody, Ash here for the Triple S League with my review of Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, Episode 9. Just saw it earlier today, and wanted to get my thoughts on it out while everything's still fresh in my brain. The first few minutes here will be free of spoilers, but there will be major spoilers later on, but I will warn you beforehand if you want to if you want to skip out on that part, not hear the spoilers, that's fine. And while I'm doing this, please enjoy this gameplay of Jedi Fallen Order. Seems fitting, or, just listen to this in the background if you want. It's all good, whatever you want to do, but anyway. So, The Rise of Skywalker, I give, if I have to give it a number value, I would give it a solid 5 out of 10. It was definitely better than The Last Jedi, which I give a 3, if I'm being generous. Probably more like a 2.5. I would give The Force Awakens somewhere around a 7 or a 7.5, so I guess averaging all those together, the entire sequel trilogy, episodes 7 through 9, would end up at somewhere around a 5, which is disappointing. Honestly, it's really disappointing to have an entire trilogy, the third trilogy in an entire saga, wind up like that is a little disappointing. I had such high hopes for the future of Star Wars back in 2015, of course, when I saw the Force Awakens. So it's unfortunate that it's turned out this way. Now that said, if I were going to rate The Rise of Skywalker just based on the effort that was put in trying to make a good movie and trying to bring this saga to a close, I would give that effort score somewhere around an 8 or a 9. Honestly, it feels like J.J. Abrams was trying to make a really good movie. He was trying to do a good job, trying to fix a lot of the problems that were created in The Last Jedi. And it didn't quite deliver, but at the same time, I wonder if it was maybe just an impossible task to really fix it properly. So in some ways, I feel like after The Last Jedi was in the bag and nothing could be changed about it, this 9th movie turned out about as well as it could, considering what came before, considering what it had to work with. So there's that. But effort does not equal success, which is why, I still put my grade of the movie at about a 5 out of 10. It had a lot of redeeming qualities. The cinematography, the visuals, the sound design, the music, the overall design was really well done. But the problems lie in the story and the character development and also some pacing issues. The movie was rushed and very poorly executed in a lot of ways. Now, with the storyline being such a mess after The Last Jedi, I feel like they needed at least 2 movies to bring the series back on course and pull it to a satisfying conclusion. But they only got 1 movie. I kind of wish Disney maybe could have given them a 10th movie to work with in order to, to pull this into a satisfying conclusion and fix everything. There probably would have been issues with actor contracts and things like that. But I feel like that's what would have been needed in order to really do this properly. But they didn't do that, of course. They only had 1 movie to work with. So episode 9 is basically 2 movies crammed into 1. 1 movie to undo the tangled mess that Rian Johnson created with The Last Jedi, and 1 movie to bring a conclusion to the entire Skywalker saga, and they had to cram it all into 1 movie's timeline. So for the first 10 to 15 minutes of The Rise of Skywalker, I felt like I was watching a recap of a previous movie that I hadn't seen, like a previously on Star Wars kind of recap that you might get at the beginning of an episode, except it was all new content. And it just felt like one of those recaps because the cuts were so rapid and it quickly jumped from thing to thing to thing to thing. It was almost dizzying how fast it went. And there was new tech thrown in and new things we hadn't seen in Star Wars before, but they just blasted past them without any kind of acknowledgement, which in some ways is good, but we didn't even get a moment to breathe and say, wait a minute, their ships can do what now? We've never seen that before. But it just kind of blasted right past it, and that happened so many times that it was kind of dizzying. And then after that rapid recap section, which was not a recap, but actually, the first part of the movie. After that, the conveniences, the coincidences, the plot conveniences, and the yada-yada-ing that was written in to just advance the plot forward was countable on, more hands than I have. And I didn't actually count those. What I did count was the number of times I did massive eye rolls and I believe I got up to 5. I'll point out all those moments later. But, as a result of all of these things that just these plot conveniences and half-hearted explanations of things that were written into the story, written into the script, certain key moments in the movie lacked believability. And that's not a good thing. When you have key character moments that just don't feel authentic and don't feel real, that really kills the story. The sad thing is, there were the pieces of a good story there. There were some solid moments throughout the film, but there was an utter failure to assemble them properly. And this is where I'm going to start getting into spoiler territory. But let me wrap up the non-spoiler part by just saying, The Rise of Skywalker is worth seeing if you need to know how the Skywalker saga ends, and if you are okay with a movie that is slightly better, well, significantly better than The Last Jedi, even if it is significantly lacking in many, many, many areas. That's what I'll put out there. They made a really good effort, I believe, to fix a lot of the problems that The Last Jedi had. Really, the story disaster that was created through that movie and through them not having a coherent plan for this trilogy going forward. Creating a bunch of story threads in the first movie that were then discarded in the second movie, and then a bunch of new garbage was thrown in the second movie, and then they had to try and reconcile all of this in this final movie of the saga, and it was not an easy task. It could definitely have been done better, but it definitely also could have been done a lot worse. So that's just my honest, raw take on it. On this evening, it's almost 11 p.m. at night after seeing the movie early this afternoon, and there you go. So I'll leave it there for the non-spoiler part, and now I'm going to get into sort of discussing some of the finer plot points of the film. I'm going to do a deep dive into the good and the bad while commentating on basically the entire movie. I'm going to read through the plot summary on the Star Wars Fandom Wiki while I do this. Not every single part. I'm not going to bore you to tears by reading everything, but I'm just going to go through the main story beats, the significant moments, and things related to character development. So it begins with the opening crawl, and this was the first eye roll. Right at the first sentence of the opening crawl, the yellow words that scroll across the screen at the beginning of every main Star Wars movie. And it opened with, the dead speak. The galaxy has heard a mysterious broadcast, a threat of revenge in the sinister voice of the late Emperor Palpatine. Now, this is a really cool concept in a lot of ways, but this violates one of the core rules of writing, which is show, don't tell. This could have been such an amazing moment to actually visualize. They could still have had the opening crawl talking about, there's this mysterious broadcast that they have to decode or something, or they have to go somewhere and hear what it's saying, and then, you could have this reveal that it's the voice of Emperor Palpatine vowing revenge. That could have been spine-chillingly awesome, especially if they hadn't, sort of spoiled the fact that Palpatine was going to be in the movie in the teasers for the movie. But anyway, they didn't do that. They decided to sum that up in 2 sentences at the beginning of the opening crawl. And that was my first eye roll moment. So anyway, movie opens with Kylo Ren killing a bunch of people to find this thing called the Wayfinder, really creative name, he said sarcastically, thing that he hooks up to his ship, and it allows him to find the location where Emperor Palpatine is on this place called Exegol, this hidden planet of the Sith. So he goes there to confront Palpatine. He's going to kill Palpatine because Palpatine is a threat to his power, and of course Kylo Ren wants to be the supreme leader, and so he initially sees Palpatine as the enemy, but then basically Palpatine reveals to him that he's been the one guiding Kylo Ren's path through his entire life. Palpatine created Snoke, and he's been these guiding voices inside Kylo Ren's head for his entire life. Then he promises that if Kylo Ren kills Rey, then Palpatine is going to give him all of this massive fleet that he's been developing on Exegol, and basically then Ren will be the new Emperor and rule the galaxy, that kind of a thing. Now, I don't know if that's really Palpatine's plan, because later on we he asks Rey to kill him so that his spirit can transfer into Rey, and he'll kind of rule through her. I don't know why he couldn't do that with Ben Solo. Like, maybe it's because Rey and Palpatine are related, as we find out later in the movie. A lot of that is not explained, and if it is explained, then I missed it. So that was a little confusing, and I hate it when the villain's plan is confusing, because clearly Palpatine wants to be the ruler. I don't think he's just going to hand over the Emperor to Kylo Ren without, remaining in control in some way, shape, or form, whether that's, as his physical form or if he's going to be, like, possessing Kylo in some way. I don't know. Anyway, we don't find out about that because things go in a different direction. But anyway, the visuals, the atmosphere in this first part of the movie is really cool. I will give them that. Like, the music, the ambiance, the shrill, violin shrieks that they use whenever you're in Palpatine's lair in this movie. So cool, so chilling, so haunting. Really awesome. I mean, a little over the top as most things are. Super dark. He's being attended to by all these hooded acolytes that, we don't ever learn who these people are. But that's another thing that kind of I had a lot of questions about that I wish there was another movie's worth of info to explain, is how does he do this? Where is he getting all the resources? Who are all these people? Like, there's hundreds or thousands of them. Not just the officers on this massive fleet of Star Destroyers that he's created, but there's all of these weird, mysterious, hooded creatures that are basically kind of worship him. I want to know more about what's going on there. I want to know more about, who these people are, where he found them, where did they come from, how did they build all of this stuff, and where did they get their resources from? There's a lot that remains unanswered there, and that's ultimately unsatisfying. But when you're in the moment in Palpatine's lair, I did find that really cool and really satisfying. So then we cut to Finn and Poe Dameron and Chewbacca on the Millennium Falcon, who are on a mission to collect a secret message from a spy inside the First Order. And, it's really kind of cool. There's a space battle and everything, but they introduced this thing called hyperspace skipping, in which they do short hyperspace jumps from system to system to try and escape their attackers. They're being chased by a whole bunch of TIE fighters. But there's like two of these weird things that they just threw in that hadn't been seen before in the movies anyway. The hyperspace skipping, which is kind of like, kind of seems like a bit of a plot hole, considering, you remember back in episode 4, traveling through hyperspace is not like dust and crops, boy. Without precise calculations, bad things can happen. I don't remember the full line exactly, but this hyperspace skipping thing, I mean, maybe it's a new technology, but it was kind of weird. But even weirder was the fact that these TIE fighters, it was like a new type of TIE fighter, follow them through hyperspace. So the TIE fighters have hyperspace drives now, or at least some of them do. And actually that was Kylo Ren's ship, in the first few scenes of the movie. It was sort of a modified TIE fighter. So I guess they've added hyperdrives to the TIE fighters, which is interesting. It makes sense that technology would advance and change in the Star Wars universe just like it does in our universe, but there were so many of these things thrown into this movie that it became a little overwhelming and a little bit like, are they just, why? Like, why are they doing this? Are they just going for dazzle and flair, or is it just plot convenience? I mean, it was a little immersion breaking. The visuals and the action were very cool, though, and that's one thing about this movie that, if you appreciate good action sequences and good visuals, good space battles, things like that, it was very cool from that perspective. There was a lot to be appreciated there. So next we move on to Rey, who is training near a resistance base on this sort of foresty jungle world, and so we see her floating, levitating. She's got rocks floating around her and stuff like that. And then she's saying, be with me, trying to, I guess, summon the former Jedi who have gone before to sort of guide her or possess her or something, be a part of who she is. And she does this kind of an awesome flip thing to come down to the ground. And it was a neat scene. Like, I could believe that by this point, the third movie in the trilogy, she could be at this level of, being able to use the Force and do some awesome things like this. But there's some big problems here because, in her character arc, we don't see that development. We don't see that struggle. We don't see that training. One of the friends I saw the movie with said, this really kind of disrespects all that Luke had to go through to become a Jedi. I mean, it really kind of does. Rey just... even someone, born with immense musical talent still has to learn how to play the piano. Nobody just sits down and starts, playing a Beethoven sonata without having a single piano lesson. It doesn't matter how talented or naturally gifted they are. And so Rey, of course, we find out she's the granddaughter of Emperor Palpatine, so she's incredibly Force-sensitive, has a lot of power within her. But where is that struggle to control it? We see a little bit of it in this 9th movie, but it's inconsistent, and I'll point out a few of those points. And again, it's just all crammed into this movie. I mean, in episode 7, I keep saying first movie when I mean episode 7. I mean the first movie of this trilogy. In episode 7, she can wield a lightsaber. She fights Kylo Ren, and she's had no training. She's never held a lightsaber before in her life. She's never used the Force before, and yet she's using the Force, pulling the lightsaber to her. Stuff that, Luke, the son of frickin' Darth Vader, had to train for a long time in order to do. There was a little bit he could do before his training, but, beyond that, it's still, you remember the scene with him in the ice monster's cave. He really had to focus to pull that saber out of the snow. So pulling the saber, I could believe. Being an equal match for Kylo Ren in a lightsaber fight, no. And then that little bit of training she had with Luke in episode 8 just did not... Oh, it's aggravating. It's like these movies were trying to get us to buy that, she was just super naturally gifted and could just figure out how to do this all on her own with no assistance. Now, by the time we get to episode 9, it's a year after the last battle in episode 8. Apparently, Rey's been training with Leia. And here's another thing that's a missed opportunity. We never see Leia do any cool Jedi stuff anywhere in this series. And yes, that scene in episode 8, that ridiculous scene of which we shall not speak, that does not count as doing cool Jedi stuff. It counts as showing that she has Force power, but I mean, again, it kind of slapped you in the face, because you're like, we've never seen Leia use the Force except for a little bit of, telepathic communication here and there. That's all I can think of. We don't see her moving stuff with her, with the Force or doing anything cool with the lightsaber, but apparently it's revealed in this movie that she was trained as a Jedi and was pretty badass with a lightsaber. It's a real missed opportunity that we never got to see any of that. Anyway, so then Poe and Finn and Chewie return in the Falcon, and the Millennium Falcon's on fire, and they argue about some bullshit. And then there's this thing. Okay, they're establishing the stakes. Palpatine is going to be launching an attack on, the entire galaxy in a matter of hours. And they know this from the message that they got from the spy. That's the mission they were on. But Rey, of course, has been studying some stuff written by Luke, and she figures out that Luke had been looking for another wayfinder, and he, had written down where he lost the trail of this wayfinder. And it's in this place called Pisana, another freaking desert planet. It's like the writers of Star Wars only know of 3 or 4 different types of biomes. It's like, there was almost an eye roll moment when I realized there was another desert planet, but that wasn't a major eye roll moment. That was just a minor eye roll moment. But Finn and Poe and Chewie are like, hey, Rey, we're going with you. And she's like, no, it's too dangerous. You have to stay here. And then they're like, oh, we're coming with you. That cliched scene that has only been in every movie ever. Oh, we're going with you. No, you can't come with me. You're staying here. No, I'm going with you whether you like it or not. Okay. You know what? For once, just be like, hey, guys, can you come along and help? Like, that'd be great. That would be great. I would love to have some friends on this mission. And, that's one thing that Rey seems like she really could use some friends by her side, for personal support and that kind of a thing. And it seems like she should be I know she's all independent and stuff, but I don't know, I get tired of this hero trope where the hero is like, oh, I don't need anybody else. Or even worse is no, I have to do this alone for reasons that will never be explained. and become moot in the next 2 minutes because my friends are going to come along anyway. But, alright, so they head out. C-3PO goes with them for some reason, and they do this weird thing with 3PO because he has to get his memory erased later in the movie. They do this weird thing where they really try to emphasize the connection he has with people. So there's a scene with him where he tells R2-D2 that you're the best friend I've ever had. And 3PO was weird in this movie. He seemed a lot twitchier than in previous movies, and I could swear he was speaking at a higher pitch. I could be wrong, but every scene I felt like they gave 3PO some caffeine before every shoot. Meanwhile, Kylo Ren is getting his helmet put back together by some guy, some alien who looks like a chimp, and the seams between the pieces of the helmet are bright red, and it looked awful. Just looked terrible. I don't know why. Like, why would Ren want to do that instead of just getting a new helmet? Maybe, I don't know. Like, did he have some sentimental attachment to this one? But anyway, it looked awful. But it was also just kind of a bang on the nose symbolism that was happening. Cracks in the armor, kind of a thing. I don't know. It was a little on the nose. Anyway, he goes and has a meeting with all of his generals and lead people, including General Hux, and tells them, oh, so Palpatine is going to give us this entire fleet of new generation Star Destroyers, Star Destroyer 2.0s, if you will, if we hunt down and kill Rey. And one of the guys is like, well, wait a minute, he's just going to give this to us? You know, what? That's a little suspicious. What's he going to want in return? And then Kylo just chokes the guy and throws him up against the ceiling because apparently trusted officers asking very reasonable questions is not tolerated in Kylo Ren's First Order. So anyway, the heroes all arrive on the desert planet, Pasana, in the Falcon, and the locals are having this festival, Festival of the Ancestors, and they're all dancing and everything. And so, Rey and Finn and them, all of them are walking through the crowd, waiting to be contacted by their contact, who's on this planet apparently, and I don't know, some random alien kid or short adult, I don't know, just comes up to Rey and gives her a necklace and says, "Welcome to our festival," and like, "What's your name?" And Rey takes this necklace and is like, "Well, I'm Rey," and "Oh, well, what's your last name?" Well, I don't have a last name. I'm just Rey, which this thing with Rey not having a name is kind of woven in throughout the movie after this point. And then all of a sudden, she's in a Force-empowered FaceTime call with Kylo Ren, like they did throughout the movie in the Last Jedi. But they bump it up a notch in this movie. They can physically interact with each other, even though they can't see where each other is physically located. But Ren grabs the necklace off of Rey. Now, this was this was a question after the previous movie, where they have this Force connection that is, when Rey is in the rain, and Kylo reaches out to her, but then, their Force connection is severed or whatever. Somebody hangs up the call, and then his glove is wet. And it's like, well, okay, wait a minute. So, did water, can the Force physically teleport matter from one to the other now? Well, apparently, yes, it can. Most absolutely. Because he grabs the necklace off of Rey, and then he has his people analyze the necklace to find out where she is. And I don't know how I feel about that, but the movie doesn't really give you time to think about how you feel about it, because it's just immediately on to the next thing. But in The Last Jedi, it's revealed that Snoke was creating the connection between Kylo and Rey. Kylo had no idea how it was happening, neither did Rey. It was just happening. And it's revealed later that Snoke was doing it. Snoke is dead now. Snoke was created by Palpatine. So does that mean Palpatine is creating this connection? Like, what's going on there? Why is this happening? And then later on, Ren tells Rey that they're like a dyad in the Force. They're connected. They've got this special Force connection. Okay, that's cool and all. But was that created by Snoke? Or was that because of their parentage? Or what's going on there? It's never explained. One of the irritating things that's never explained. Anyway, there's some First Order guys at this folk festival, because of course there are. And some stuff happens, and they wind up encountering Lando, who is apparently the contact, I guess, that Leia said they'd be meeting on the planet. But anyway, so Lando's there, and he had apparently come there with Luke long time before, looking for the Wayfinder. When they couldn't find it, Lando stayed behind for some reason. And so, lucky for our heroes, he's able to lead them to, where the trail went cold. Anyway, some bullshit happens, and then, by complete random coincidence, and I mean random coincidence and really, really lucky, fortunate events, they find themselves in some underground caves, which lead to the next clue, and they find this dagger, which is inscribed with a Sith language. 3PO looks at it. He can recognize the language, but his programming forbids him to translate it. He's forbidden to translate the Sith language. He knows exactly what it says, but he can't tell them. Then they encounter this wounded creature, and Rey uses Force healing to heal it. And so this basically reveals that she's got Force healing powers. It's, I believe, the first time Force healing has been used in any of the movies. And it's explained as her just transferring life force to the creature, and this becomes important later. Then the Knights of Ren arrive and are like hunting them. Now, the Knights of Ren are very cool in concept, in idea, but they seem to be inept as hell because all they do is stand nearby. They never, we don't see, they don't fight the heroes at any point. They always seem to be nearby, but not close enough, or they just are standing at a distance. They do, however, capture Chewbacca, and then they take him to a transport, and they just leave. That's all they do. They just go away. Meanwhile, there's Kylo Ren, and he watches as, Rey sees the transport take off with Chewbacca in it, and she uses the Force to try and stop it. So she uses the Force to basically pull on the ship, and it kind of stops it, and she starts to pull it back down to the ground. It's kind of crazy. This is one of these things where it's like, if she's got the power to do this, there's so many other circumstances, like earlier, I didn't describe this part, but when they're randomly, they start sinking in the sand, and they just happen to stumble into, and then they wind up in these underground tunnels. But before they know that they're going to the underground tunnels, I'm thinking, Rey, use your freaking Force powers and pull everybody up out of the sand. And if she can pull a spaceship that is trying to fly away, then she could definitely do that. So that's what I meant earlier when I said her powers are inconsistent. Or she's just dumb. But the movie does not portray her as dumb, so she just conveniently forgets she has the Force at certain times or something. It's kind of ridiculous. There's so many points where she could have used awesome Force powers to cause things to happen, and just doesn't. Anyway, she's trying to pull the ship. Kylo Ren tries to interfere and let the ship go, and then Rey accidentally uses Force lightning, tapping into the dark side of the Force, apparently. Destroys the ship, it crashes to the ground. They all think Chewbacca's dead. Actually, Chewbacca was on a different transport, and, then takes off to Ren's command ship. But back to Rey using the Force lightning. This is where we needed an entire, a whole other movie to explore Rey's character. Because this struggle with her being pulled to the dark side could have been so awesome. Like, if the second movie had started with, she's been training for a while, and she's getting really powerful, but then she starts to get pulled to the dark side, and maybe the second movie ends with her conflicted and not sure what to do. You could leave it on a bit of a cliffhanger, and you don't know if she's going to go to the dark side or the light side. Maybe you start to see those cracks in the armor for Kylo Ren, and you don't know, is he going to become good? Is Rey going to go bad? And that's just one idea. There's so many awesome things that could have been done with this, but it's kind of just yada-yada'd away. It's kind of just compressed into this isolated event. And then she's kind of conflicted throughout the rest of the movie, and she's worried she's getting pulled to the dark side, and she's having to fight that. But it's so quickly brushed aside, it's so quickly resolved after this, that it was ultimately very unsatisfying. What could have been a very, very cool character development arc, really, a character development struggle. There was just a lot of wasted potential there. Okay, so everybody is sad because they think Chewbacca's dead, and then it's revealed that 3PO memorized what was on the dagger, even though the dagger's gone. But he's memorized that, but of course he cannot translate it for them because of his programming restrictions. So they go and look for a droid hacker, and they go to this planet called Kijimi, and they're no longer on the Falcon. They're on another ship. I'm not going to explain all of that, but they find this other droid on the ship, a little cone-headed dude called D.O. So they go to Kijimi. Poe's looking for his own crew, and wonder of wonders, they just happen to run into his old girlfriend, who's part of this crew, and then There's some bullshit that happens there as well, and then they go back to their sort of hidden base to find this guy who's, good at hacking droids and can hack C-3PO. It's this little alien dude named Babu Frick, which I think is not only one of the funniest names ever in Star Wars, but is one of the most adorable characters ever in Star Wars. Not Baby Yoda adorable, but just a really funny little endearing character. Anyway, he's like, yeah, I can hack your droid, but it's going to, result in him completely losing his memory, and this is C-3PO's big emotional moment in the story. And yet it really felt hard to feel bad about, especially when Poe was like, what are you worried about? Doesn't R2-D2 back up your memory? And then 3PO's like, R2-D2's memory banks are notoriously unreliable, but you know that you knew at that moment that, his memory's not going to be gone permanently. He's just going to lose the memory since his last backup. And so it really took the emotional punch out of it, because he's like, oh, I'm just taking one last look at my friends. I mean, I guess it's kind of poignant that, 3PO realizes he's going to forget everything and everybody, but he chooses to do the heroic thing, which is kind of awesome that they gave 3PO such an important task, because he's in a lot of ways, he's just baggage in most of the previous movies. So they gave him the opportunity to be the hero, and that was pretty awesome. Of course, then they did this stupid thing where just before his memory gets wiped, he lifts his head up and is like, I've just thought of another way we can do this, and then oh, he's gone. Okay, but anyway, apparently speaking in Sith language causes the C-3PO type droids to have their eyes turn red, and they speak in an evil voice, and that's what happens. 3PO delivers this message, just saying exactly where the Wayfinder is, and then he shuts down and he has no memory. And he boots back up, and it's like he's booting up for the first time, and he's introducing himself to everybody. So anyway, the First Order is there, and the Knights of Ren are there, and so they have to escape, and so they go to leave for Endor. The Wayfinder is in the wreckage of the second Death Star that was destroyed over the moon of Endor. But just before they're leaving, they realize, oh, Chewbacca's alive. Rey senses him or something. I can't even remember really how that happened. In the wiki here, it just says Rey senses that Chewie's alive. So they decide to board Ren's Star Destroyer and rescue Chewie and get the dagger back and stuff like that. Now, this is the most contrived plot point, one of the most contrived plot points in the movie. Now, if they had played up the necessity of the dagger in order to find the Wayfinder, which it turns out they do later, then this would have made more sense if there was no hope without it. But they don't know that at this point, so they're mostly going on board the ship to rescue Chewbacca. Which, okay, I get that Chewbacca's important and they want to rescue him, but at the same time, it's a really, really stupid thing for them to do. It's almost Rose Tico collision course with Finn level of stupid, as he's about to save the day. It's just so dumb. They managed to sneak their ship on board the Star Destroyer because of some nonsense. This item they have through sheer convenience and luck that lets them land, basically without alarm. But then they step off the ship, guns blazing, blasting stormtroopers left and right. Haven't you guys seen the first movie? Take down a couple of stormtroopers quietly, wear the armor, and then just walk around the ship unimpeded. Don't go around blasting everything in sight. They took the Han Solo approach as opposed to the Obi-Wan Kenobi, Luke Skywalker approach. It was really, really dumb. But it was necessary because they do get the dagger back, and there's another Force-empowered FaceTime call between Kylo and Rey, and stuff's revealed about her parents that I'm not gonna get it. I mean, she's Palpatine's granddaughter, so her dad is Palpatine's son, basically. And they sold her off to protect her from Palpatine, is kind of how it's explained. Then they have a lightsaber duel through their Force connection. And then we find out that Palpatine didn't actually want to kill Rey when he was looking for her. He wanted to, he just wanted to get her. He wanted to bring her to himself. So this is where it got confusing. Did Palpatine, when he told Kylo to kill Rey at the beginning of the movie, did he know that, could he foresee the future and realize, oh, Kylo's not going to do that, but this will result in Rey coming to me so I can fulfill my plan? None of that is ever explained. Meanwhile, Finn, Poe, and Chewie are captured by the First Order, because of course they are. Like I said, this was the stupidest mission that they could have gone on. You know, the fate of the universe basically rests on them, and they decided to do something this dumb. It was kind of unbelievable. It was immersion breaking. It was immersion breaking levels of stupid. But anyway, so they one of the top guys is like, okay, go off and execute them. So General Hux goes off with like just 3 stormtroopers who are about to shoot them dead. Finn, Poe, and Chewie, and then Hux is like, oh, I want to do this myself, so he takes the blaster, and then he shoots all the stormtroopers, and because there's only 3 of them, and turns to them and is like, I'm the spy! That was another one of the massive eye-roll moments. I think I might have missed 1 or 2. Anyway, this whole part of the movie was epic levels of stupid, and then Hux gets killed because they realize he's the spy after that, and also he was no longer important to the movie after that, so whatever. He gets offed in a very unceremonious manner. So anyway, the heroes all go to this place called Kefbir, which is one of the moons of the Endor system. Not the same moon, not the forest moon from Return of the Jedi, but it's a different one. But some of the Death Star wreckage has landed here, including like the big laser dish thing and the part that had the Emperor's throne room in it. They run into these people riding space horses. Just basically like alien horses, and they're like they're locals. And then we find out one of them is this lady who once was a stormtrooper, just like Finn was. And so they sort of build this connection between them because they're both, stormtroopers who defected from the First Order. And they have this instant bond, and this is where, again, the compressed action of the movie really was a detriment, because like if this had happened in the second movie of the trilogy, you could really have had the opportunity to build a relationship between, Jannah is her name, and you could have built a relationship between her and Finn that could have been really meaningful with their shared history as stormtroopers who betrayed the First Order. So it was a really cool idea, but again, unfortunately, could not be explored to its full potential, which is really unfortunate for Finn's character arc, because Finn hasn't had the worst character arc, arguably better than Rey's, but it's never fully explored, why he chose to defect against the First Order. We don't see any other stormtroopers doing this until, this final movie where he finds, a whole, actually, like, Jannah and all the people with her, there was this whole squadron of them who lay down their arms. Or at least, when she defected, her entire squadron defected. I don't know if it's the same people she was with when they encounter her here on Kefbir, but, these are people that were raised and indoctrinated by the First Order to be stormtroopers since childhood. And so I wish that could have been explored more, what that was like for them and what leads some of them to turn away from that despite intense indoctrination. Anyway, remember that dagger that is so important apparently? Well, not only does it have writing on it, but if you line up, the blade is kind of oddly shaped, and if you line it up with a specific part of the Death Star's wreckage, it like matches, and there's this extending part that pulls out that points to exactly where to find the Wayfinder. Now, Rey, of course, just happens to be standing in the right spot to make this work. It's nonsense. It's so much convenience. It was so contrived. It was, again, just very immersion-breaking. I'd rather she had just gone to the Death Star wreckage and just looked for the thing and, like, maybe felt it calling to her, or just felt its presence because it's, a Force-empowered object. This dagger thing was just a ridiculous MacGuffin used to find another MacGuffin. Oh, and it's also the dagger that killed Rey's parents. How about that? So anyway, Rey finds her way into the Emperor's old throne room, which is kind of cool to see, and then in this adjacent room, she finds the Wayfinder, which there's, I guess, dark force power in the room, and she sees like a vision of herself as a Sith, and she fights this other version of herself. It's kind of reminiscent of Luke going into the tree in Empire Strikes Back, where he has that vision of Darth Vader that he fights, and then Vader's helmet explodes and it's Luke's face inside the helmet. It was kind of reminiscent of that, but anyway, she comes out of the room, and what do you know, Kylo Ren's there. He gets the Wayfinder and destroys it. And he does this deliberately to try and make Rey angry, because his plan at this point is to turn her to the dark side, and then together they go and kill Palpatine, and then they become the new Emperors and rule together and make little Sith babies, I guess. I don't know. Something like that. So, of course, she's like, no, of course not. And then they have a lightsaber duel. And while they're fighting, it cuts back to the Resistance base, where somehow, right at that moment, Leia realizes she needs to contact her son through a Force FaceTime call. Well, not a FaceTime call, just a regular Force phone call in this case. She goes off by herself, and then Maz is there, and she's like, Leia knows that contacting her son right now will cost all her strength or something like that. I'm like, why? Why? How? Who? What's going on? How do you know that? How does she know that? How? This is the most contrived contrivance yet in this movie. Because then, so Leia reaches out through the Force and calls to her son right at that moment, and that distracts him and lets Rey get the upper hand, and she impales him with a lightsaber. Then she feels bad about this or something, and decides to use her Force heal on him, so she heals this frickin' lightsaber wound that was right through his torso. And then she takes Kylo's ship, his TIE fighter, which was destroyed earlier in the movie, but now he's got another one, or maybe he was flying a different one earlier when, Rey cut the wing off it on the other planet and it got destroyed. I don't know. I don't know how to explain that one. But anyway, so she takes his, awesome modified TIE fighter that has a hyperdrive, and she goes off to the planet where Luke had exiled himself, because she knows at this point that she's the granddaughter of Palpatine. She's shaken up, she's scared that she's going to turn to the dark side, so she decides to do what Luke did and hide herself away there. But of course, Luke's Force Ghost shows up and mentors her a bit and inspires her to do the right thing, and she's got to face Palpatine like Luke faced Vader, da-da-da-da-da. They give her Leia's lightsaber, and somewhere in here, we see a really cool scene of Luke and Leia training together when they're young. And they're both wearing masks, but they're doing this cool lightsaber duel with flips and stuff. And then, they pull the visors of their masks up, and you see the obviously CG created faces of young Luke and young Leia. And it was kind of unnerving because they looked fake as hell, but very cool moment at the same time. And again, missed opportunity, so much more we could have seen there. Why did Leia have all this power and never use it? She's not, fighting dudes with lightsabers. There's so much she could have done. Maybe thrown ships around during space battles. I don't know. Anyway, Rey gets Leia's lightsaber, and then she realizes that the other Wayfinder is on Ren's ship, so she goes and gets that. And then Luke pulls his old X-Wing out of the water, which is both awesome and terrible at the same time. It's awesome because it's very reminiscent of the scene from Empire Strikes Back, where he's unable to pull his X-Wing out of the swamp, so it was, a nice callback to that. So he pulls his X-Wing up and gives it to Rey, basically. But this is also terrible because it creates a huge problem, because we've now established, and it was somewhat established in the Last Jedi as well, that the Jedi can, their Force ghosts, after they die, can interact with the physical world, not just showing up and talking to people, but actually moving things with the Force. And he also catches a lightsaber that Rey throws at one point. So I'm thinking, if you Force ghosts can do that kind of stuff, why do you just sit around on your semi-transparent asses all the time? Why don't you get in there and help your friends out? It's kind of ridiculous. It just opens up a bunch of huge plot holes. It's kind of the Eagles question from Lord of the Rings. Why didn't they just ride the Eagles to Mordor? And there's maybe reasons for it, maybe explanations for it, but again, it just opens up so many questions that never get answers. So Rey flies off to Exegol, and she sends a transmission to the Resistance at the same time of her location, so that they can follow her there. Meanwhile, Kylo has a conversation with Han Solo, who is not a Force ghost, but is just a memory, I guess, an apparition out of his own memory. I kind of feel like it'd be cooler if he was a Force ghost, but I know he wasn't a Jedi, but I don't know. Maybe it could have worked somehow. And I guess at this point, Kylo decides he's going to be good, and he's going to be Ben Solo again, and he throws his lightsaber into the ocean. And again, this is one of those moments that I found less than believable, because when he arrives at the Death Star wreckage, he's fully committed to the dark side, into, destroying Palpatine, but then ruling forever. And yes, I know there's kind of been these hints of him struggling throughout the movie, but it didn't feel like this was enough of a push to push him all the way to the good side. I mean, he fought Rey, he heard his mother's voice, and then Rey heals him, and then he decides to be good. Just was not believably done. And again, this is a story development arc that could have taken place over the final 2 movies and been done really well. But again, it had to be compressed into the second half of the second movie, and it just didn't feel believable. And that's just one of the main problems that this movie has. Meanwhile, Palpatine sends one of his new Star Destroyer 2.0s to the First Order, and they send it to Kijimi to destroy it, because all of these new Star Destroyers that the Emperor has have planet-destroying lasers on them. They got this gigantic laser that comes down from the underneath, and it can destroy an entire planet. This is where the movie went from, you know how on old video games you'd get the top score and it would be 99999, and then it would roll over back to 0 because it couldn't count higher than that? That's kind of what happened in my brain at this moment, because I was like, this is where it went from larger than life to just groundbreakingly ridiculous. And like I said earlier, it makes sense that technology will advance, but you're telling me the Emperor's been sitting on this dark planet in the middle of nowhere and built not only a gigantic fleet of hundreds of Star Destroyers, but each one has a laser that's powerful enough to destroy a planet. That just broke my brain. I was like, I cannot take this movie seriously anymore. Anyway, whatever. That's what happened. So then the guy who's in command of the First Order becomes in command of the Emperor's new fleet. So Rey gets to Exegol and confronts Palpatine, and he's like, now you need to kill me, and my spirit will transfer into you, and I'm going to rule through you. Also, the Resistance arrives and starts fighting, Palpatine's fleet. And they get their butts kicked. And then Palpatine's like, the only way you can save them is to strike me down, and then you can put a stop to this. Anyway, then Kylo Ren gets there, and the Knights of Ren all surround him, and then he kicks their butts and kills them all. Oh, and they do this force transfer thing where Rey transfers her lightsaber to him through the Force. It's this new thing that's been established now that they can do this. Anyway, Kylo, or Ben Solo, I guess, gets to where Rey is, and they're going to fight Palpatine, but then Palpatine's like, you guys are a dyad in the Force, or whatever. And because of this, he can absorb their life energy and kind of rejuvenate himself. And then he's can disconnect from the life support equipment that he's been attached to this whole time. And then he throws Ben into a pit. And then Rey hears the voices of Jedi in her head. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Qui-Gon Jinn, Ahsoka, Yoda, Mace Windu, and a bunch of others. Luke and Anakin both. And they got the actors. They got Sam Jackson. They got Liam Neeson. They got Hayden Christensen. And some of these actors filmed scenes to appear as Force ghosts. We know from other info outside the movie. And this was, again, another missed opportunity. Instead of doing this stupid thing where it's like Palpatine's like, all the Sith live in me, and then Rey's like, all the Jedi are in me, which lends itself to some kind of an adult parody, I think. You could have had, since it's established that Force ghosts can interact with the world and carry lightsabers, you could have had an army of Sith ghosts fighting an army of Jedi Force ghosts. All the Sith and Jedi from previous movies, and it could have been something pretty spectacular. Instead, Palpatine fires lightning at Rey, and she deflects it with her lightsaber, and then she gets a second lightsaber, and with the second lightsaber, with two lightsabers together, she's able to blast the lightning back at Palpatine, and he goes splat. Basically. Apparently she dies from the effort, because the Jedi in these movies, man, they exert so much effort that it kills them, with every little thing they do now. So it's implied that she dies, but then Ben Solo pulls himself up out of the pit and transfers his life force to her, and then he dies, and then he fades away, And then at that same moment, Leia's body fades away. And why? Why did she not fade away right when she died earlier on? And it's just pretty established that she's dead. They cover her with a sheet and stuff, and she's dead. But she doesn't fade away until Ben dies? I don't know. Meanwhile, the Resistance is still getting their butts kicked by the Emperor's fleet, but then Lando shows up with crap tons of reinforcements, and, they destroy the Emperor's entire fleet. So everybody's celebrating, and then Maz gives Chewie a medal. I guess it was Han's medal that he had, that he got at the end of Episode 4. That famous scene where they got medals and Chewie didn't get a medal. So Chewie finally got his medal. Everybody's celebrating, and then Rey flies off to Tatooine, and she goes to the Lars homestead where Luke was raised, and she buries Luke's and Leia's lightsabers. There's another question that was never answered throughout the entire trilogy, was how did Maz end up with Luke's lightsaber in Episode 7? And she's like, that's a good story for another time, and then they never come back to that, and that irritates the crap out of me. Anyway, she buries these lightsabers in the sand. She's now got her own lightsaber, which looks pretty cool, actually. It's kind of got a yellowish blade. And some local just happens to be walking by, some old woman, and she asks, who are you? There's been no one here for so long. Who are you? And Rey's like, oh, I'm Rey. Rey who? Which I don't believe it's established that everybody in Star Wars has to have a last name. In fact, many of them don't. But anyway, there's this whole thing with Rey's name, and then she says, I'm Rey Skywalker, and then that's, the end of the movie, basically. So, now, I had heard about that scene as a spoiler before I watched the movie, and it sounded awful. In the end, it was only about half as awful as I was anticipating, that one particular scene where she's like, I'm Rey Skywalker. I would have rather she had just said, just Rey, and just kept it at that. This whole thing of her, sort of adopting herself into the Skywalker lineage now just kind of doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, if the romance between her and Ben Solo had kicked off, and they do kiss right before he dies, then maybe, okay, she could marry into the Skywalker family, and that would make a little more sense. But this, they had one kiss, and then the dude kicked the bucket, and yeah, she had some training with Luke and Leia. I mean, I guess she got pretty close to Leia. So anyway, it's not the worst ending in the world, but was kind of cringy. I mean, even if it had been acted better or acted differently or portrayed differently, if it had been more of a momentary, she's like, oh, I'm on the Skywalker. Well, I guess it was the Lars farm, not the Skywalker farm. But if she had just been like spur of the moment, like, oh, I'm Rey Skywalker, and then she looks over and sees Luke and Leia's Force ghosts, and they kind of nod approvingly, maybe, or something like that, and she's like, okay, I didn't really think that through, but I'm gonna go with it, and it kind of fits. Okay, sure, but then I don't know. It was just kind of weird. It was just the way they did it just didn't really work for me. But again, it wasn't quite as terrible and cringy as I was anticipating that it would be. I can kind of say that for the whole movie. Wasn't as terrible as I was anticipating it to be. But at the same time, so much wasted potential. So many character arcs. Like Poe Dameron, you discover he's got this old girlfriend and this old crew he used to run with, and he was a spice runner, and we don't know what that is, but, whatever. It was kind of shady, apparently. I mean, Poe had some amends to make and some trust to be regained after his actions in The Last Jedi. That could have been his character arc for this movie. But instead, it's just kind of, Leia just, puts him in charge. I mean, maybe he's proven himself over the past year, but Poe Dameron's character just didn't go anywhere in this movie. And I think that covers the character arcs of all of the major characters. I like that 3PO got his hero moment. And it was nice seeing Lando in the movie, although he didn't do all that much. He could have done a lot more, I feel. I think the common theme here is they could have done so much more. There was so much wasted potential, so much crammed into this movie. It needed another movie to flesh all of this out. And it's unfortunate that it has gone this way. But that said, it could have gone a lot worse at the same time. I think the whole thing with Palpatine was a really cool idea. It's unfortunate that it feels like it kind of got shoved in at the end. If they had been weaving that in throughout the entire trilogy, that could have been a lot better. But I don't believe that was their plan from the beginning. If it had been their plan from the beginning, maybe a lot of the unanswered questions that I've brought up here would have been answered. And the ending really sucked. I mean, Palpatine just kind of went splat. Like I said, I am all the Sith, I am all the Jedi. 2 lightsabers can counter your lightning, splat. I don't know, it was very anticlimactic. You know, special effects and, you know, exploding lightning and all that aside, it was very anticlimactic. Also, how the hell did he survive? Vader threw him down the shaft of, you know, on the Death Star, the second Death Star, and then the Death Star blew up. How did he survive? Is he in the body? Is he in like a cloned body? They hint at that in the movie. Did he like? What happened? And if he transferred into like a cloned body of himself, like what's stopping him from coming back again? Way too many unanswered questions. And I realize maybe there's expanded lore and stuff that has the answers to these, and I'm anticipating reading a number of those kinds of things in the comments. But at least the important ones should really be answered within the context of the movie, because a lot of people are not going to read the comic books and the novelizations and those kinds of things. Maybe they haven't seen every episode of Star Wars Rebels and all of that. So I've been rambling for a very long time, and I think I've covered everything that I want to say. So I hope you enjoyed this review of The Rise of Skywalker. I'll repeat what I said near the beginning. If you're burning to know how the Skywalker saga ends, and you're okay with a movie that is a 5 out of 10 when The Last Jedi was maybe a 3 out of 10, and The Force Awakens was a 7 to 7.5 out of 10, if you're okay with a movie that is sort of halfway between those two, then I guess see it, you know? Or, you know, wait for it to be released later. If you don't want to pay extra money for it, maybe you don't think a 5 out of 10 movie is worth paying ticket price for. Totally fair. Kind of a disappointing end to the Skywalker saga, but there are some rumors that things might be looking up for the Star Wars franchise, and if these rumors prove to be true, we could be getting some really good Star Wars content in the future. Definitely recommend checking out The Mandalorian if you haven't seen that. If you want a pretty decent Star Wars game, play the one that you're seeing on your screen right now. Jedi Fallen Order, also really good. Okay, so that's it for this. Thank you so much for watching. Slam that like button if you appreciated this, and I will talk to you again very soon. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, sub, and hit that notification bell, and then check out some of these other videos. Find the link to our Discord server and other important stuff in the description below.